and welcome to the Huddle Breakdown. My name is Laura Bradburn. I'm joined as always by James and Alan. I say as always, I was looking back, it's been a few weeks since the three of us have been on together. It's certainly been a few weeks since I've been on. The last time I was on was to reflect on a 1-0 win over St Mirren, which we are going to talk a little bit about in comparison to our recent performance. They may not be as dissimilar as you might think, despite the result. But apart from that, everything at Celtic's been going great, has it not, James?
Well, to put that into some perspective, I've got my drink shirt on. So, yeah, that's how I feel like I need to self-medicate to get through this period. So I will admit I'm doing a little bit of that. Not until after 5 p.m. I'm not a total degenerate. But.
Alan, I think I've been doing quite well given my reputation for slightly over-emotional responses to keep my head when all around me are losing theirs. But nevertheless, it is good to be back in your company to get a bit of the more reasonable takes on what's going on at the moment.
Well, there's not a lot reasonable going on at the moment. I mean, for a start, let's take James. I mean, James, everybody knows you can't drink a T-shirt. I mean, come on, lad.
You can't, however, kiss your cousins, though.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that's an ecumenical matter. No, listen. Yeah, we're just deflecting and buying for time here. If we can goof around for the next 45 and a half minutes, that'd be quite good. Anything to avoid talking about the football, maybe.
Unfortunately not. Let's get stuck right into what everybody's here to talk about. Now, if you've been living under a rock, you will not have acknowledged the fact that we did in fact lose the League Cup final to St Mirren at the weekend. 3-1 was the final score, I believe. Alan, I'll come to you first. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of the game itself, there's a lot of discussion going on about player selection, about tactics, about whether the manager should stay wed to his system, whether he should adapt it to suit the players that he has, and where the balance is between those two approaches. I guess my question for you is, in terms of Nancy or any manager coming into a club, what is it that they need to sort of get their feet under the table to start to succeed? What would you expect to see that would give us an idea of whether he's getting somewhere with this team?
Yeah, I mean, obviously at a human level, there's dozens of things that need to come into alignment to be successful. But I boil it down to two things, right? And the first one is very simple. To get the job, you'll have had to have sold a vision. You'll have to sold a vision to the board or the people whoever it was that hired you. And they'll have to believe that you are the right person to bring success for them, and they're all going to get the reflected glory of that, and everyone's going to be happy. So a manager has to be a salesperson. They have to be very good at selling that vision, at articulating it, at telling a story as to why the way that they play, what they bring, what they will bring, is relevant and contextual to your football club, etc., etc. And having achieved the job, you've then got to do the same thing with the players. You've got to convince the players that what you're selling, they want to buy. They want to invest their effort, their time, because a dressing room is a brutal place, as any of us that have ever been in a sports dressing room will tell you. And players, although they're generally quite young, and maybe immature in many ways, they can sense either weakness or spoofery or lack of clarity or lack of conviction, etc. Somebody like Ange Postecoglou could come all the way around the world, walk into a dressing room on his own without any support, and command a level of respect. Okay, now and that is the task that Wilfried Nancy has taken on with Celtic. He has to convince these players to go up the mountain with him in terms of, this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it. That is absolutely crucial. If you do not get that bit right, it is a long, arduous journey, and it may be a very short journey because you may not last very long. And history is littered with examples of this, some high-profile ones. The one that none of these analogies are a perfect fit because there's far too many variables involved, too many differences and specifics. The one that sprung to my mind immediately was, Frank de Boer taking over Crystal Palace in 2017. He had particular ideas about how he wanted the team to play, and he couldn't convince the players that this is how they should be playing. And he lasted 4 matches. They didn't score a single goal. Lasted 4 league games. Some of these are quite high profile. Ronald Koeman, Barcelona legend. When they won their first European Cup, I think he was the captain. Well, he scored. I don't think he scored the winning goal. He might not have been the captain. He scored the winning goal. He became Barcelona manager in 2020-21. He was in probably classic in some respects Dutch style. Not the best man manager. His style of personality didn't gel with the dressing room, and then there started to be questions about his tactical approach, and it disintegrated very quickly. Another one, Roy Hodgson, took over Liverpool in 10-11. Was that after Benitez? Probably after Benitez, which is again, following a club legend is never easy, right? And Roy Hodgson, with him, the issue was he had very sort of outmoded training methods. His football was very defensive, and he just simply didn't gel with the culture of the club and the culture of the way that the players expected to play. So I could go on and on. There's so many examples of this. It's so vital. And listen, you can recover, and we'll come to that. But there's certain things which characterize this type of experience at a football club. The manager is ignoring the player feedback initially, so they don't get buy-in. They fail to adapt their methods to the specific context of the club and the players that they are working with. They lack either authority or perhaps empathy, and they don't deliver early evidence that, come on guys, this is going to work. And 3 defeats in a row is certainly that. It's not delivering evidence that this is going to work. And the last one, which is characteristic of managers that come in and don't convince the players, which I don't think has happened yet, but we all remember Russell Martin, is you start criticising the players. Now, there have been comments about lacking composure, lacking confidence, and we'll perhaps come to that as well. So listen, it is recoverable. This can be recovered. Kenny Dalglish at Liverpool, when he moved from the dressing room to the boot room, was a very difficult situation for all the players who had been his friend, and he adopted the persona of manager, but they got there in the end. Alex Ferguson came into Manchester United and tried to tackle the drinking culture at that club. That was very difficult, but that was incredible patience shown by them, because he didn't actually win for about 4 years. Arsene Wenger, when he came into Arsenal, and he tried to completely revolutionise the whole training methodologies, the nutrition, etc. Perhaps there are numerous examples at Chelsea. Chelsea in this century has probably had arguably the most difficult dressing room of any club in world football. The post-Mourinho dressing room was toxic, and players like Drogba, Lampard, Terry, those players, they were sceptical of every manager post Mourinho. When Conte went in there in 2016, and he's a very abrasive character. Again, it was very difficult, but they ended up winning the league that season. Now, these are great managers that I've just listed there, and Nancy's an inexperienced manager. Ultimately, if you win games of football, you'll turn the corner, right? And but at the moment, we're not seeing that. The players really looking for 2 things: evidence, as I say, that this is going to work. We win matches. And second, that the individual players feel that, well, I'm improving. I'm learning something here. I'm becoming a better player. So that's the first thing. The second thing is recruitment. Oh dear. And I'm not going to go back through all the conversations that we've had, but if you look at the summer recruitment, obviously Tierney, I think, is a top player, and I think he's been pretty good. Nygren, he's still the top scorer. He has utility, but now 2 managers have benched him. Callum Osmond injured. Inamura bombed out. Yamada bombed out. Balikwisha benched by 3 managers. Tunetki has some strong attributes, but confidence is in tatters. And the areas where he's weak, there's no evidence that he's improving, and Iheanacho injured. So if you don't support the new manager with the recruitment, you're not giving him the tools to succeed. And as we'll come to with some of the numbers in this episode, this is by some distance not the strongest Celtic team of the last 15 or so years. So we'll get into the weeds of it, but those two things, the players have to buy into it. You have to get recruitment right, and neither of those things are on his side at the moment. Is the public data? It's the public data, and the words of the players tell you that. And if that continues, then this is not going to last very long.
Yeah, James, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the final itself and why it turned out the way it did, just to reflect on Alan's comments there, he talks about player buy-in and about players feeling that they're learning something under the manager, and that has to occur for it to be a success. I've got to say that sticks in my craw a little bit, to use a Glaswegian phrase, just because I constantly hear about managers having to justify themselves to players, and I get that they have to do that because the players are implementing their system on the pitch. But these players are not in a strong position in terms of they're not having a good season, they're not playing well. It isn't a Lampard, Terry Drogba situation where these players are world-class players who are in a position perhaps to dictate to the manager what should or shouldn't be done. I mean, where do you stand on it? Because I feel if I was Wilfried Nancy, I would feel a little bit aggrieved and say, you'll do what I say because I'm the manager. And if you do what I say, it will work. Yeah. It's not that would probably not go down well. But I guess my point just is that, I don't know who Liam Scales is to tell anybody how to play a football match. I don't know who Tanecki is to tell anybody how to play a football match. The list could go on. Am I being too harsh on the current crop of players?
I wouldn't say harsh, maybe a bit unrealistic. I think that this is why I was really dreading this transition, because I thought Nancy, almost outside of a perfect string of results, was being set up to just be kneecapped. The way that things unfolded under Martin O'Neill's tenure, and the way that the backdrop of the summer, and I've been calling it now because to me it's mushroom clouding into a clear civil war that's unfolding, with people that are they have the knives out for Paul Tisdale. I think that's pretty clear and obvious to me. Which again, fair enough. If you think the guy is unqualified, I'm not going to argue that. I personally don't. I'm not confident enough to seen enough evidence to render an opinion one way or the other. I've said that on here multiple times. That's still my position. Again, I'm not going to argue with someone that has more information than I do, having a different opinion. But the way that this has become, it's started to become a bit unseemly to me, to the point where, to me, using, it's my common sense. I think it's common sense, but you've had people at the club for many years, like John Kennedy, who just logically will have relationships inside the club. And when him and Rodgers staff departed, not everyone left. And you have this handful of people that came in a way that has not been normal, meaning that the staff at Celtic, much to many of the support's chagrin, has been an old boys network and, nepotism and all these other things that people have used to bludgeon the board and the club at times in the past. Well, now we've had a transition where that has been less so. Jobs for the boys, jobs for life, while you have 3 or 4 guys come into this environment that's still that culture, still been there forever. And the idea that there aren't people talking, because they didn't like the Civil War breaking in Tisdale favor and Rodgers leaving and Kennedy leaving. I just think it's normal to expect there to be a lot of chatter, a lot of people talking. is my guess. And people around the club, and there's a lot of people around the club that know people around the club, and it creates journalists, people that know people on the staff, people that know player agents, all of this stuff. People are talking, and that creates a halo effect. Basically, what's going on is information warfare. That's kind of what this one of people in our Huddle Breakdown chat room, pointed to an article in Ireland that there's almost never criticism of Dermot Desmond, apparently, in the Irish press. And they positioned it as, criticism of Dermot Desmond. And I read the article. I was like, this actually looks like information warfare against Tisdale. This is the narrative that's now getting pushed through journalists. And I want to stress, I'm not taking a position on that from an analytical perspective. I fully think that's plausible that the guy's out of his sorts and not doing a great job. But this all filters down on Nancy now. Nancy's now part of the Tisdale Civil War. And so he gets no charity. He gets no, he gets people watching his press conference performance today and just completely taking stuff out of context or not addressing it in honest and good faith ways. Like, you can say you don't like the job he's doing, you can disagree on the speed with which he's deploying his stuff, all that's, but you can't come away with the guy, what he's been saying in the meetings, he's being unreasonable or going stuff like, his English isn't good enough. I mean, just, archaic nonsense. So I think that's the context here. We've gone into a complete mess where you've got warring factions inside the club, outside the club, and you got this manager who's just trying to do his job and probably has people on the staff and or in the building that are trying to get him fired. That wouldn't surprise me. And trying to get Tisdale fired, that wouldn't surprise me. Because that's what happens in these kinds of things in the business world. People start to take things personally, and they want to keep their job and or acquire more power and more money, more influence. It's the way of the world, unfortunately. So I expect that's the mess that's unfolding. And the idea that this is all going to work out hunky-dory, I think is unlikely. I agree with Alan in that sense. He's not going to get a lot of time probably, because the pressure cooker inside with this level of warring factions, it's just, or he's just going to walk away because putting up with this kind of stuff, given the hand that he's been dealt. And again, we'll get into this. I mean, 10 of the 11 starters in this St. Mirren game were the same as the ones that Martin O'Neill had at Paisley. So he's dealing with the same players. Players play the game. You can move the pieces on the chessboard around a little bit, but ultimately it's still the same players.
Yeah, you're setting me up. I'm all prepped to do a rewatch of Succession after listening to that. That's what it sounds like. Sounds like the
knives are out. That's right.
Yeah, and although that was Heart of Midlothian, obviously, that were in that particular series. If you know, you know. If you haven't watched that, by the way, great series. Get it watched. Although they do their best to make Dundee look particularly unglamorous in one episode when Brian Cox's character goes home for a visit. Not hard, I know, but yeah. Alan, I'll come back to you. James, we are going to talk about the comparisons between the St Mirren game under Martin O'Neill and the cup final in a second, but I just want to get Alan's overall thoughts on the game first. Alan, I wasn't at home at the weekend, so I've only seen snippets of the final. Started obviously with that conceding of the goal from the set piece after only 2 minutes. I have to say, St Mirren manager Stephen Robinson looked like the cat that got the cream. Something he had planned definitely came off when that set piece sort of came to fruition. We got back into the game and equalised, but then subsequently lost the game 3-1. What was your overall impressions of the game and how it went, and maybe an introduction into the ideas of where it started to go wrong as well?
Oh, so again, I'm going to take a more of a general overview of the last week, really. What is going on here is, despite what Nancy said, and again, I'm with James in that, some of the online reaction to his press conference today, and this is Tuesday that we're recording this. is in such bad faith, cherry picking and taking it out of context, and actually, or responding to Scottish press that have done this, and then is pretty disgraceful. But one thing I think he did say, and I don't believe I'm taking him out of context, when his first opening press conference was this idea of adding nuance to the way the team played, and in fact, even today, he was reinforcing that he's not reinventing football. Now, I kind of agree with that in the sense of, and I think I've spelled out on previous episodes why, if you look at Nancy's game model, it honestly isn't a million miles away from how the team have played under Postecoglou and Rodgers. It's more similar in many aspects, and again, go back to last week's episode where I explain all of this. I'm not going to repeat it here for brevity's sake. Then actually, the transition from how what Rodgers was playing to how Martin O'Neill wanted them to play. So I do have some sympathy with him on that, but again, I come back to the point of, you've got to convince the players. And as far as it appears, as far as they're concerned, and the comments I'm referring to are from Callum McGregor about pre-match about meeting halfway. I mean, Callum McGregor is a incredibly statesman-like, I would say, representative of Celtic. He chooses his words carefully. He's always thinking of the club above himself. He would never wittingly say anything that he felt would damage the club. And when he talked about meeting the manager halfway, that I would suggest that's code for just doing quite a lot of heavy lifting for some of the perhaps tension that there is underneath all that. I think Liam Scales' reaction to some questions was perhaps more honest and blunt. But I do say this, if you look at that Celtic squad, if I had to pick one player that in terms of his stoicism, his workmanlike, hardworking, get your head down, do your best, be professional, I couldn't think of a better exemplar of all those things than Liam Scales. And if you've pissed off Liam Scales, I would suggest we're not in good shape, right? Because he would be one of the last people I would expect to be, have revolutionary thoughts in any sense. But this is all about change management. I spent my career in this sort of stuff, effectively doing change management. It's really difficult. It's very difficult because people don't like change. So immediately, in any organization, the immune system kicks in and resists change. Because it's hard, it's difficult, it requires you to think in a different way, to perform in a different way, and it's not comfortable and it's painful. And then suddenly all the certainties that you had, when you walked into work one day are not quite as certain the other day, and nobody likes that situation. So it's difficult. So it has to be handled tactfully, it has to be planned carefully, and it probably needs to be, something which you do over time, and then until everyone's kind of comfortable, and then maybe you can accelerate once the kind of general principles have been agreed and everyone's kind of on the same page as to, well, I had doubts about this at the beginning, but clearly me grumbling about it is going to change anything. This is the way we're going. The best thing I can do is get on with it, so I'm going to get behind it. That's like the least worst sort of best outcome, if you like. If you try and change too much all at once, then you're setting yourself up to failure again. And now you asked about the corner, and to me this is the most concerning thing. This is the single most concerning change that I've seen so far, is that we've moved away from what I would consider to be the optimal model of defending set pieces, which is a hybrid of zonal and man-to-man. And the basic principles are quite simple. You mark zonally in the areas that you would not want the ball to come, which is sort of either post, middle of the goal, and then you man-to-man mark the best headers of the ball. And what we seem to have done is move to a man-to-man marking system. Now, I hate man-to-man marking at corners. I think it's stupid. It's easily beaten, and we saw that crystal clear. 3 goals were conceded from corners in 3 games, and the worst example was probably the St Mirren one, where a well-organised opponent can take all your headers of the ball out. Liam Scales was taken to the edge of the box. He's our best header of the ball. Liam Scales is the best box defending header Celtic have got in the squad by a distance. And Gogic, because he was man-to-man marking him, took him almost outside the box, leaving Rio Hatate, who was man-marking Fraser. Celtic have got a small team. If you man-to-man mark, you're inevitably going to end up with mismatches because we're a smaller team. Man-to-man marking allows the opposition to take you into areas you don't want to go, to create space where you wouldn't want the ball to end up, i.e. in the middle of the goal, just outside the 6-yard box, which is exactly where it went. Now, so I think it's a terrible system. A lot of people who like 4-4-2 and two lads up front love it because and the only reason I can think they love it is because the only answer I ever get on this is, well, you know who to blame if it goes wrong. Well, whoopie fucking do. But wouldn't it be better if you had a slightly more organized system that kind of, negated the risks before they actually arose? Now, I have no idea why we've decided to do this. This is a huge change, right? So that to me is a red flag. But if you go through, listen, I'm not talking about any other game other than the St Mirren game, right? But, in this game, you are asking Maeda to play as a number 10, never played as a number 10. You're asking Liam Scales to be an underlapping left-sided centre-back who rampages up the centre of the pitch. Now, Liam Scales has played left wing-back and he's played a traditional sort of centre-back in a back three. I'm not aware he's played that role before. McCowan as a left wing-back, never played that role before. Tunetke as a wing-back. On the right, now he's played about 9 games in his life on the right, but never as a wing-back. Rolston as a right centre-back. Donovan as a right centre-back. James Forrest as a number 10. I don't think James has ever played that position in all the time. And James Forrest's career at Celtic overlaps quite strongly with the Celtic by numbers analysis universe, if I can put it that way. Rio Hatate as an 8, then a 10, and then an 8 again. Engels as an 8, a 10, and then an 8 again. Yang as a right wing-back. Right, I've just listed about, a dozen, 10 changes there, all at the same time. You cannot make that number of changes at the same time. You've got to take people with you. And if you, for example, said, right, today, I want you, Tony Ralston, to be a right centre-back, and this is what I want you to do it, and I'm not going to change anything else, then everybody could get comfortable with that. Everyone could say, okay, well, let's see how that works. Oh, yeah, Tony Ralston did quite well because he's performing this role, which is a new role for him, within the safety of everyone else around him being familiar with what they are doing. And therefore, it's a change that we can make. And once he's comfortable with that, right, Tunetke, I'm going to ask you to be more of a wing back than an out-and-out winger. Okay. And just make that change. And everyone else carries on in similar roles to what they're comfortable with, et cetera, et cetera. And you build it up like that. And then that gains confidence, it gains trust. It doesn't break things. Now some changes about breaking things, but that's more about changing an organizational culture that you don't like or is unhealthy, rather than taking a team which is our champions, and we know that they're flawed, but they are champions. You don't want to just throw it all out the window. You've got to say, well, what are we good at? What can we do? What do you do well? Let's keep doing that, and then we'll add bits. We'll add bits gradually. The most concerning thing for me, other than the corner thing, probably even actually no, I'll put it above the corner thing, is all the chatter about the situation with Stevie Woods, the goalkeeping coach. Because I thought, of all the things at Celtic that I need to worry about, probably one thing I don't need to worry about is the goalkeeping coach. Because apparently we've got one of the best goalkeeping coaches in the industry, well liked by the players, well regarded within the game in general. And, the noises are that, it's been made clear that he perhaps his position might not be as secure as he thought it was. That is just creating, if you think about, again, people in the organisation a long time, who knows who's friends with who. This is somebody who's very well regarded inside and outside. Why are you creating this issue that you don't need to create? There might be something else that's going on here. I don't know. So all this then resulted on the day, and I'm just again talking about the St Mirren game. What do you see? Well, you see a complete lack of belief and resilience in the team. What do I mean by that? In the first half, once we'd got the equalising goal, I thought we were Celtic were very comfortable in the game. And although they weren't creating a bundle of chances, they were controlling the ball. And they were controlling St Mirren and playing in a way that if you go back over the last 7 or 8 years, we've won 30 out of 33 games against St Mirren because we control the ball, we control the space, we make them work, we shift them around, we probe, and then we break them down. Because they're not a team that's going to have the ball for a long time. We don't want to give them lots of corners and throw-ins. We don't want to give them the ball and let them launch it on top of our centre-backs and then fight for it because God knows what's going to happen. You keep the ball and so forth. And we did that for most of the second half. So why then do you come out in the second half and you go back and watch the first 10 minutes of that second half and we're just shelling the ball. We get the ball, we shell it. Where did that come from? Because Nancy on the sidelines is going mental. He's going mental for more or less most of the second half. So clearly he's not happy with the way they're playing. Why have we suddenly decided that, we were playing coherently, we had control of the game, and then suddenly you lose all belief in what you're doing, and you just start to launch it? Exactly the same thing happened at Hearts. Once that first goal went in, they'd actually been playing really well. And then it just fell apart. So you've got ill discipline, and it's not just ill discipline in terms of things like Schmeichel losing his shit at everybody, or Maeda kicking people, or it's ill discipline in terms of positional discipline. It's ill discipline in terms of people trying shots from 30 yards rather than building the play. People trying Hollywood passes. Liam Scales, hello. Every time they get near the box, rather than controlling the game, building the play. When Nancy talked about composure, that's what he's talking about. The confusions on the touchline over substitutions. These are all signs of stress. They're all stressor indicators. And why are these stressor indicators? Because everyone is trying to absorb and take on too much change. And it doesn't work. And I agree with you, Laura. The players have got responsibility here. Absolutely, they do. But for whatever reason, Nancy's not convincing them that what he's asking them to do isn't that much different to what Rodgers and Postecoglou asked them to do. It isn't. It really isn't. But somehow they don't believe him. So Nancy's going to have to take. He's going to have to take a step back here, and he's going to have to work out, how do I take these players with me? Because the signs on Sunday were of absolute disarray.
James, you were going to say something.
I agree with that, particularly the second half. And this goes back to why I've been railing on so much, particularly, for the benefit of most people inside the ecosphere of Huddle Breakdown. So, everyone else doesn't have to listen to me drone on about this kind of garbage as much as I do, which is a higher quality attribution of what actually happened during Martin O'Neill's tenure. Because these players are in an ecosphere. So you talk about Stevie Woods, Alan. He would be a classic candidate for someone that would be an internal revolutionary in some kind of civil war. I'm not saying he is. I have no idea. But the idea that he might not have a long-term relationship with John Kennedy, I don't know. It kind of seemed normal to me. They've been on the same coaching staff for God knows how long, right? So,
are you saying Stevie Woods is the Lafayette of this whole situation?
What I'm saying is this is a mess, and that the idea that you have a new coaching staff in that are trying to put stuff in, and I agree with Alan. There's no way to know why we did this in set pieces. Did they just come in and check? I honestly, I haven't looked yet. I'm going to look back. It's one of the 50 things I want to try to do now, and look back at how Columbus Crew defended corners. Because if they went this way, I agree, it's stupid given our personnel, particularly stupid against St. Mirren. Is it something he delegated to Gavin Strachan? And Strachan's wanted to go this way he's had this internal desire to go to man marking forever. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying it could happen. Maybe that's why it happened, because Nancy's got 50,000 things on his plate in this transition, and he delegated something to Strachan, who was nominally the set piece coach from reports. So I don't want to blame Strachan because I have no idea. I also don't want to blame Nancy because I don't have any idea. So I'm going to go look and try to get some evidence. What's more likely, right? But this is why it is a complete mess, because we're in it's the fog of war where you have competing narratives, information warfare. I don't I don't even rule out the idea of somebody like Callum McGregor. So again, who spent his entire career with a personal relationship with John Kennedy, maybe not being happy with how this all went down with Rogers leaving and Kennedy leaving. I'm not saying that's true, but it wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world. Okay. And when this type of stuff, I'm not even assigning nefarious means to this civil war. Most civil wars, people on both sides think that they're fighting for the good side, right? Go listen to Bob Dylan, for God's sakes, right? So, you know, the idea that they think they're fighting for the club, it's because they think that this Tisdale guy and whatever's going on is bad news, that he's not doing a good job. You could do that in good faith. That's what I'm saying, though. It's a mess because you have people probably overtly fighting against the new regime and trying to poison the well. I think that's probably what's happening. And you're not going to have that's not fair to anybody involved. It's a complete shit show. That's why I labeled my piece a mess this week. But can we transition now, Laura, to this discussion? Because I think it's a good time to do.
Just before we do that, I just want to give Matt a little thought on this whole the whole discussion that's just happened. I'm in total agreement about the set pieces, I have to say, because as Alan says, if you do man marking, people get dragged away from the areas of real concern. You want Liam Scales in between the two posts near the 6-yard box to get the ball away, because that is the most dangerous area. The other thing I hate man marking for is not only do you know who to blame if it goes wrong, but everybody thinks they're carrying out their duty if they keep a hold of their man, which means it only takes one man to get free and then there's danger because he's only had one guy to get away from, if you know what I mean. He's not had to find space amongst the 3 or 4 different guys who could potentially pick him up. So yeah, I totally agree with that. The other thing I was going to say was, you mentioned about the similarities between potentially between what Nancy's trying to do and what Postecoglou and Rodgers did. The frustration amongst the players is not something I have a great amount of sympathy for because, and this is me saying this is not anybody else, I think the average intelligence of the average footballer is grossly overestimated at times. And the idea that they would be able to see the similarities between the different systems is what's the word, well, I don't believe it would happen to the extent that some people would. I think they would still need to explain to them in great detail, perhaps, you know, with a little board with figures on it at the side of the pitch in very simple terms. Maybe there's a reason those get used as often as they do. But there's so much about the last few weeks not being on here that I've seen discussed that I'm just like, the discourse around it is as fractured as what I believe is going on inside the club, and I think you guys are entirely right to have picked that up. Speaking of similarities, James, I'll come back to you. I assume this is what you were going to, so I'll not, but feel free to re-steer the conversation if it wasn't. So many people are desperate to carry on this narrative that Martin O'Neill had this magic touch. He created something that nobody else could create. He had us playing fast-flowing football that would have got us to a Europa League final or something like it if he'd been allowed to stay on. But you've got some figures at hand that suggest that maybe our opponent on Sunday, who was very similar to the opponent we played under Martin O'Neill a few weeks ago, maybe the outcomes and some of the data that you've collected shows there isn't as big a difference as some people might like to think there is.
Yeah, so I want to start by saying, and I think it probably comes through with what Alan and I have said already, but objectively, this was a terrible performance in the cup final, right? So this is not trying to polish a turd. This was an absolute turd. What my point is let's be consistent with our identification of polished turds, okay? So the game that we played against St. Mirren under Martin O'Neill was in the same neighborhood of the toilet. It was awful, to the point where, I'm not going to share your slide now, Alan, as I say that, I put mine up, this was well, why don't you discuss your slide quick, Alan, and then I'll transition into my slide. We'll do comparative slides here for some context.
This is 8 years of data going back to 2017. These are domestic matches in which Celtic have a negative expected goals difference and a negative packing score. Now, as you can see, it doesn't happen very often, and indeed, half the instances are in derby matches, and a lot of them clustered around the sort of Neil Lennon, Steve Gerrard sort of period. Steve Clark is responsible for a couple of them, and Derek McInnes at Hearts. So it doesn't happen very often. It rarely happens against, let's call it, a bottom six team. In fact, the instances against Kilmarnock, I don't think they were a bottom six team. So really, the only instances were this season against St Mirren twice, and this is again very rare that this happens. Celtic did actually win, 5 out of these kind of 11 games because positive variance, stronger team, etc., etc. But again, this doesn't happen very often. The people who invented the packing concept are adamant, and I've spoken to them, that packing score is a better predictor of who's going to win the match than XG. As in, if you have the higher packing score, I think they claim a 75% correlation between having the highest packing score and winning the game. Now there's nuance in there. I mean, the packing score of +2 or -2 in this case is probably not going to guarantee anything. But you take my point. So objectively, because again, packing covers a huge array of on-field attributes, from passing capabilities through to off-ball movement, etc., and control, and then obviously XG is the quality of the chances. So I think this is a fairly holistic view on performance, drilled down to 2 metrics, and none are golden bullets, etc. So objectively, these were 2 absolutely terrible performances against Mirren this season. Stephen Robinson obviously deserves credit, but nevertheless, almost unprecedented for Celtic to be struggling to that degree against a team in the bottom 6 currently. And as I say, the other thing to bear in mind with this is that nearly half of these occurrences have been in the last sort of year and a bit.
Okay, so I'm going to throw up my slide now. And again, for people who are listening, so this is taking Alan's data and comparing the 2 games to give a little more granularity as to the degree to which, I'll call it the structural plumbing of the game was so similar. Everything from possession, XG, packing scores, just shots on target was the big difference, by the way. And post-shot XG was the other huge difference. So whereas in the game that Martin O'Neill managed, McMiniman just barely missed tapping in across, and then off of a header where if this sounds familiar, the back post was wide open on a header that was actually contested, though. And then McMiniman fires a shot from outside the box, and it just glances off the post. So again, within inches of going in, that's when you get these levels of performance from Celtic domestically, these are the games that you typically drop points, because the narrow margin of performance levels on a comparative basis lead to just normal randomness game to game. Sometimes they drop on against you. So the reason why I wanted to get into this even more and amplify it is I think it's only normal that, again, within the context of what's going on in the club, that the players to a degree bought in to what had become a very pervasive narrative about this winning 7 out of 8 games and this renaissance under Martin O'Neill. And, outside of the Feyenoord game and 2 games that you would expect, which, by the way, Nancy has not had a chance to manage against yet, a team like Falkirk and Kilmarnock at home, which were both very good matchups for Celtic. He's had 3 pretty tough opponents, and as bad as this is why I say it, and this is, I'm going to go over like talking about a turd. This is going to go over like a turd. Is all of the things that Alan, that I agree with the changing, and my biggest criticism about the performance or the managerial component of what he could control on Sunday was I didn't like the decisions that he made as far as where to put people. And I if anything, I think he needs to go more towards putting different players in different positions. Stop with the square peg round hole stuff, because these are the guys that have been playing type of thing, like Engels and Maeda's a 10. Like, put him at wing back maybe, but he's not a 10. So either put him at striker or put him at wing, or don't get overwrought with trying to put too many guys in the team in positions that don't make sense. So that's my criticism, or one of them. But even with all of that, even as disastrous as some of the stuff that he decided to do was on Sunday, it was basically on par with this disaster. And think about the gulf in narrative between Martin O'Neill's performance in the job versus what we're experiencing right now. That's really my point, is this massive amount of difference in response and characterization. And of course, we won that game and we lost this game 3-1. But this goes back to what the why part of why it's bad faith as far as how people were dealing with Nancy's press conference, is the manager can't control whether McMenamin taps that ball in or if it goes 6 inches to the left and he scores 2 goals against. Martin O'Neill did not have a voodoo doll that controlled the finishing of St. Mirren that day. It happened to break in his favor. And on Sunday, it broke against us, above and beyond all of the other crap. Even if we'd have pulled out a win in extra time. Oh, by the way, it kind of would have been like the Rangers game, that was also a debacle against 10 men in the second half under Martin O'Neill, right? So you pull out wins a lot at Celtic, even though you don't play well, because of just randomness. So that was why I wanted to go over this, is because I think, again, this is part of the lineage of why I could see the players buying in and waking up and saying, oh, this guy's changing. We won 7 out of 8. We were playing great. No, you weren't. You were playing crappy for a Celtic team. And oh, by the way, 10 of the 11 players that started on Sunday were the same players that started in this game or that game under Martin O'Neill. And when Iheanacho went off injured, which I actually think was a huge problem, he was the one player that was meaningful, knitting together the way that Nancy wants us to play. We went to 11 out of 11 because Kenny came on and he was the striker in that game in Paisley. So even with this mess, they basically played the same as they did under Martin O'Neill. Not exactly the same, but you know what I mean. The outcome, the things that the manager could control in a mess was basically similar to what happened under Martin O'Neill.
Yeah, and I think just to head this off at the pass before we, not that the listeners and viewers of the Huddle Breakdown will accuse us of this, but any clips that come from this that suggest that we are in any way saying, Nancy is managing in any way comparably to Martin O'Neill is not what the takeaway message is here. It's that a win by a single goal can come down to something as sort of random as a deflection or a player losing concentration for a moment and missing a shot or something like that. The point of the matter is, as we always talk about on the Huddle Breakdown, stats are important because they show how likely you are to get a result, even with the randomness that comes into things. So I think it's still worth noting.
And trying to explain what randomness is under your control and what randomness you have no control over. I mean, that St. Mirren's keeper had a pretty good day on Sunday. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Nancy should have borrowed the voodoo doll that Salinger just let a ball in on a header from Engels against Hibs, right? Those are the types of things. That's just football. That's the randomness.
Yeah, and Nancy can't do anything to control Schmeichel continuing to fail to find a teammate. He can't do anything about Scales.
Well, I can drop him.
Well, he could drop him, but yeah, he can't do anything.
Maybe that's why Stevie Woods is on the way out.
Yeah, can't do anything about Scales.
Again, who knows? Who knows?
Can't do anything about Scales choosing to pass it out, or Maeda missing good chances, or these are all things that the manager can only do so much about. So there's got to be balance in there,
right? And again, that's we're not, him putting Maeda in a 10. I vehemently disagree with. Like I had hopes with the way that things were progressing last week, that were dashed mightily on Sunday when I saw the team sheet. It just didn't happen. So I'm hoping that he continues to make progress. And again, maybe I'm wrong too. But yeah, so this is not a universalist thing. I'm not saying that all the decisions he made were correct. Some of the stuff he had control over, I think he got wrong. But I also don't want to criticize him for stuff that he can't control. And that's why I'm belaboring the point.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not been a lucky general so far, and that does tend to happen though when things aren't coherent. You tend to get luck going against you. I mean, the classic was the Roma game, where the first corner of the game, bullets off of Liam Scales' head, and if you had picked the ball up and said, "Put this in the top corner," you could not have put it in a more perfect place than glancing the top of the bar right in the corner quadrant. And then, in the second half, Evan Ferguson gets to a Celtic corner, and my goodness, it just scrapes the post, rather than going into the net. These are just small examples.
And Engels, a very good penalty taker, misses a penalty.
Yeah, misses a penalty. Actually, I think Nancy's even said, I don't really believe in luck, and I think he's trying to. That's all part of positive mindset. Control what you can control. Don't worry about things that you can't control, and that's really been the message in a lot of his press conferences. Oh, and by the way, right, I'm just going to get this off my chest. So I've given him a bit of a bashing there, and I've tried to balance it up with a little bit. But can I just say, can we please, everybody, stop going on about this? He doesn't think that he's at Celtic to win. Just please stop it. Just stop it. Stop it. Stop it. It's absolute nonsense, right? He made his position very clear. Very clear. He wants to win. Spurs wants to win. We want to win. I want to win. James wants to win. Laura wants to win. We all want to win, right? But, if I was managing Celtic, I want to win. And if I came into the press conference and said, we're going to win on Saturday because we're going to show fashion and fight, and we're going to graft, and we're going to get stuck in, and we're going to, desire and all that. And therefore we're going to win. But I am not Gandalf. I cannot will a win into existence just because I want to win. That's not how it works. That's not how professional sport works. That's not how life works at all, right? All he's saying is, I want to win. Can I control all the variables in the match that will guarantee the outcome in the next game whereby we win? Of course he can't. He cannot influence the weather, the pitch, the referee, the opposition, on and on and on and on and on. What can he control? He can control how well the players are performed, such that on the day they're in optimal physical and mental preparation and prepared tactically to face that opposition. That's all he can do. So when he's saying, I don't worry about winning, he doesn't mean say he doesn't want to win. He just means I will control what I can control. And if I do my job properly and the players do their job properly, I think we probably will win. But of course, I can't guarantee it because nobody can. That's all he's saying. It's as simple as that. So let's please stop getting hung up on this.
Did you not watch the video, Alan? He said he didn't want to win. That's what they would usually say. But yeah, no, it's I've seen much of that discourse online, and I'm fully in agreement with you, Alan. Let's move on to our opponents this week. Tomorrow night, as we record, so Wednesday night this week, we are playing away at Tannadice in the league against Dundee United. James, I'll come to you first on this. We've talked about the fact that Nancy's had 3 tough games. He's had the league leaders, he's had Roma, and he's had a League Cup final, who, despite the fact it's against St Mirren, who we should be beating, it's a League Cup final. Anything can happen in a cup final, so that's a little bit of a sort of outlier in that sense. Dundee United, although it is an away game, they've only won 3 games this season. They won against Dundee in August. They won against, Aberdeen in September. And their last victory, which came 9 games ago, so 8 games ago, 1 victory in the last 8 was against St Mirren. They beat them 3-1 at home in October. They're sitting in 8th place in the league. I guess I'm setting you up to say he's had a tough run. This is really the first opportunity, I would say, and I don't know if you agree, where there are no excuses. He has to show us something here that would suggest he can comfortably beat a side of the kind of stature of where Dundee United are at just now. Am I hoping for too much by saying that.
I wish that were the case. And just out of the spirit of consistency, I did pinpoint this game, i.e. Dundee United at Tannadice, as a likely trapped game this season, period, before any of this went down. Because the team that they've built is better optimized playing at that stadium with the pitch dimensions. And they have gone towards a more hyper set piece optimization framework. Given everything we just talked about and the state of our squad and what's going on with set pieces, I think it would be really crazy to dismiss this as a threatening game. It tends to be a little more chaotic with the smaller pitch. You know, they're going to get a lot of long throw, and they're going to take them. They're going to take long throws out the yin yang. They're going to, you know, if they get corners, they got a bunch of big guys throughout their team. And that in some ways is similar to St. Mirren. And I just want to circle back one more thing, because I don't think we gave Stephen Robinson enough credit in this game. And John Walker, sorry, everyone who's a Rangers supporter who puts out good analysis on Twitter, did a great job of documenting the tactical shift that Robinson made. Basically, if you tell me if you've heard this before, let Trusty have the ball and man mark our midfield. And that was part of when, as Alan said, I would argue also with Iheanacho going off, those two things led to the mess that was that second half performance. And I think the frustration that Nancy showed was that because the men were man marked and guys like Engels aren't very good at getting open, I've talked about that for over a year now, they just started shelling the ball. So that they got frustrated and started to try to really. So I we'll see what Goodwin does. I don't know what Goodwin's game plan is going to be, if he's paying attention at all. And we know one person at least that's working at Dundee United who's really smart and really follows this stuff and is really competitive. So I suspect Goodwin will have watched the game and have been presented with the things that worked against Celtic. So it's up to Nancy to figure something out. So it's a test. I think all the informed stuff and everything, I think this is a tough matchup anyway on a relative basis. This is way tougher than Falkirk at home or, you know, a lot of other type of game dynamics because of the very specific way that Dundee United play, the composition of their team. It's not to say I think we shouldn't come up with solutions, because I think we should, and we should be able to. But it's just, I don't think it's as black and white as it's Dundee United. They've been in crap form. Their underlying data isn't great this season overall, like XG differential, that kind of stuff. But I think those kind of criteria, particularly the state of our squad right now, and again, I don't want to belabor it, but I'd argue at least 5, probably 6 of the players that finished that cup final, similar to the cup final against Aberdeen, are, you know, like mid-table SPFL level players. Let's be honest about it. This whole idea that we've got the most talented team in Scotland, well, not when half of them are out injured, and we're left with what finished that game. And Nancy made it worse by asking some of them to do things that they probably shouldn't have been doing, like Donovan at right center back. I thought that was a really bad decision. So the depth isn't there, the quality isn't there. So he really has a big challenge here in the midst of all this mess that we've been documenting and discussing today. So I don't have some supreme confidence going into this game. I sure as hell hope so, because otherwise this is just going to continue to get worse, this mess that we're in culturally.
Yeah, that point you made about the quality of our squad and the players that we're missing. There was a shot at the cup final on Sunday of, I think, Jota, Carter, Vickers and Alistair Johnston all sitting together in the stand, and you just thought, my goodness, if those 3 were on the pitch, how much better could we be? But that's not the case, and yeah, unfortunately we have to do without them for the foreseeable future. Alan, I've not dived into the underlying data for Dundee United, which, as James says, is poor, but even just looking at briefly at the table at stuff like goals for, goals against, I mean, my impression of it is that it's going to be a bit of a grind this game, that neither team's particularly good at scoring goals, and it's going to be one where it's going to be quite tight. Have I made a gross oversimplification there, or what does your figures say?
So again, and I'm glad you haven't looked at them, because otherwise, it'd be pretty redundant. So, yeah. So listen, this first one's all about style of play. So again, green and red don't mean good or bad particularly in this context, although apart from the top two. So this is a team that by expected points are probably about 9th in the league, and by expected goal difference are probably about 7th. So this is Dundee United, I'd say, kind of a bit of a beige team, if I'm honest with you. So I'll try and kind of focus on the highlights already. So stylistically, probably no great surprises in that. They basically are going to be a team that has very little possession. They're 11th in the league for passes completed, and 10th for amount of possession that they have. So on their small pitch, and by small I mean it's 5x3. So what's that? 15 square yards. Smaller than Celtic Park, to be precise. The one thing I would highlight is near the bottom. No team in the league has matches where the ball is in play for less time. That speaks a little bit to the amount of performative art there will be around every single throw-in. The amount of shirt rubbing and towel grabbing that will go on to prepare for any throw-in anywhere near the sort of halfway line and towards the Celtic. Otherwise, they actually profile very similarly to St Mirren, unfortunately, in the sense that they're a team that are quite comfortable not having much of the ball. They're quite comfortable to play any football they do in the opponent's half, not their own half, so they're not going to fanny around in their own box or anything like that. And a team that is going to make a performance out of every single set piece opportunity that they have. They don't press or counter press to any great volume, but remember, again, that's in the context of only having 43% possession, which means that they will press and they will counter press. Selectively, they're just not as good at it as St Mirren are. If we move forward to their sort of defensive performances, again, highlights in here. One again, very similar to St Mirren. They're actually second in the league for suppressing XG per shot, and they're also second in the league for managing to not get caught on the counter attack, which tends to be where you get good quality shots. Those two things kind of go together a little bit. Again, they've got one of the deepest defensive lines in the league, so they're going to be dropping quite deep, as did St Mirren. And they actually managed to limit teams, again, second best in the league, to limiting teams to only having 62% of their shots within the Dundee United box. Having said that, they do concede a lot of shots. The goalkeeper has to save 3.5 a game, which is the 10th, the third highest in the league, really. And the opposition do get a lot of touches in their box, but they do seem to be able to limit the quality of those chances quite well. And then finally, in attack, to your point, Laura, yeah, they're not the best. They're kind of overperforming. They're second actually in terms of XG overperformance, so they're probably due not to score one. But on the other hand, goalkeepers have been performing quite well against them, so that swings and roundabout and all that. The one to worry about is the set piece expected goals for is third best in the league, 0.56 per game, so obvious danger there. And they do get, again, third best in terms of counter attack shots that they generate. Again, counter attack shots tend to be of decent value. Other than that, they're a solidly middle of the table team, but as James says, they do profile, I would say, probably very similar, adjacent to St Mirren in terms of style of play, probably not quite as well organised, not quite as good on the press, not quite as robust in their in their defensive shape.
Yeah, I would say the one phase of play where they stand out a little bit versus St Mirren is that they will try to build out from the back at times more. Now, I don't know if they'll do that against Celtic, but generally speaking, they're a little less direct, so they get caught with high press at times, and so I think we could counter press them and press them a little more effectively, and that's this double whammy that we get against a team like St. Mirren, which is they don't give us much of a chance at all to press or counter press, which nullifies that huge strength, and then the set piece issue. So I think we face the set piece issue, but less so. I think they've actually conceded the highest amount of high press shots in the league. So they get caught trying to fumble about. They just need to go direct, right? They just need to do what everyone wants Nancy to do, is just get that thing forward. Don't putz around at the back.
That sounds ideal to me. Down with the horseshoe of death. Down with it.
Do you know what, Laura? You joke, right? But I bet you were all crying out for the horseshoe of utility now. It would seem like a comfort blanket. At least we'd have some control. What we've been lacking in all three games is, we start going direct and we lose all control of the game, and that's, you need to. Celtic won the league for X number of years because we control the ball, we control the game.
Going direct worked under Martin O'Neill, Alan. They're just doing conditioning. That's that recency bias.
Yeah, I think we'll go by Alan's face. If you're listening, he made a very exasperated face there. So I think we'll call it quits there. Fingers crossed, you guys are talking to Martin later on in the week about a Celtic victory, the first Celtic victory under Wilfried Nancy, and it's the start.
God help us all, if not. God help us all.
Yeah. Thank you, James. Thank you, Alan, for joining me. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. Alan, before we go, where can everybody find the output from the Huddle Breakdown, and what sort of things can they expect?
Yeah, sure. So listen, as I said, a lot of interest, I think, in the St. Mirren Cup final data. The stat pack went out today, which are comprehensive. I think it's 18 slides of pages of information, data from the game. That's only available for domestic cup competitions on huddlebreakdown.com. None of the vendors will do the Scottish Cup or the League Cup. You can actually subscribe for 7. You get 7 days. You get a free 7-day trial if you want to try that. Hopefully, even if you just want to look at the stat pack or whatever, if you look at the other content on the site, so all the articles, the analysis of refereeing, the extra time pod, which is a bit, we let that breathe, probably do a little bit longer, more deep dives, the special interview series, they're all there. If you like those, then hopefully you'll stay around and after the 7-day trial, but you can do that. If you're just casually listening, please, even if you're just on YouTube, please just like and leave a comment, because it really helps us kind of grow the channel, and do similarly on any platform that you're consuming your podcasts. Yeah,
and dare I suggest, given the season we are in, if you've got a spreadsheet shagger amongst you that you're struggling to find a gift for, then a wee subscription to the Huddle Breakdown would do no harm. And if they're boring you senseless over the Christmas dinner table with their thoughts about XG and pack scores and whatever, then we have a whole community on the Substack that they can chat away to their heart's content to. A lovely, friendly bunch of people who will out-geek each other until the cows come home. It's really great to see.
We're not above gag gifts either. So if you want to wind somebody up because they hate this crap, go ahead, do it.
Gift away.
When I heard gag gifts there, James, I thought we were talking about something entirely different, but we'll leave that there, and we will see you all again next week.